world is never going to be the same again.
I'm worried about the world.
The mass chaos and crises that there was in the world, it's going to be just like that now.
This is not an accident.
How long is it going to last? Longer than, even for those of you that have some cash in the bank, way past your cash reserves.
Out of 100 people, 4 will get the message.
This thing isn't going to be over in a few weeks. This thing isn't going to be over in a few months.
Bank digital currencies got really hot. What is the place for XRP in a world where you have these other assets that are able to, sort of seamlessly do fast, quick, cheap transactions across borders?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. I think the way Ripple uses XRP is as a bridge currency. And whether you have a digital fiat, whether it's a tokenized, as some countries are investigating, or you don't have it tokenized, you still have that friction between currencies. So from my point of view, it's actually great to see central banks around the world investing in this space. And the more efficient the local rails are, the more demand there will be to have efficient cross-border rails. So I look at this as a very positive development. I've spoken publicly about some of the work that Ripple is doing in partnering with, in some cases, consulting with central banks around the world to help them think through. And look, the XRP Ledger is an extremely efficient ledger, and the ability to issue new assets and new tokens, if you will, on the XRP Ledger is very straightforward, and that was part of the original design. So I feel very good about where the world's going in that regard, and I think it actually helps Ripple's business and how we're using the XRP Ledger.
So in this sort of worldview that you're pitching, would it be that you have, say a US digital dollar at some point, you've got a digital renminbi, and then XRP would sort of act as that bridge that people would swap into to go into those patchwork of different central bank digital currencies? Or maybe you could just zero in on that.
Yeah, look, if you think about it, whether or not a central bank is a tokenized digital asset or it is a currency, you still have the need to have liquidity and settlement between other currencies. So, but my viewpoint is when these central banks are experimenting with and in some cases moving forward deploying a central bank issued digital asset, I don't think it changes anything for how Ripple is going to market. In fact, I think in some ways it helps because, again, as I said, the more efficient your local rail is, the more demand there'll be for efficient cross-border transactions. And managing that liquidity, today, you've got liquidity between 100 different currencies around the world. If you can have liquidity with one that then has that bridge to lots of currencies around the world, that can be managed much more efficiently. So I don't think it changes anything substantial. The other thing, by the way, I'll just point out, and I've talked about this a little bit publicly. I've always been a little bit curious about some of the central bank, being clear about what problem you're trying to solve. If you are the bank of Bob and you go to the Fed window here in the United States, you're not getting a pallet of printed dollars. You're getting a ledger entry, a digital ledger entry that you're borrowing money from the Fed, and then most of your currency on your balance sheet is digital. And so I think being really clear about what problem you're trying to solve with a central bank issued digital asset is very important. And that's been the foundation of the conversations we've had with central banks around the world.
A couple of years ago, you took a big stake in a company called MoneyGram that does remittances and cross-border transactions. You've wound down that relationship, as I understand. But what learnings have you gleaned from
accounts around the world so that you can issue debits and credits, typically using what we call the SWIFT network and messaging around the SWIFT network. So with MoneyGram, we're able to partner with them and demonstrate how you can use XRP liquidity, how you can use this to make it not need to pre-fund and make it very efficient, very fast. And we proved that out. And the investment we made in MoneyGram also worked out really, really well for us. Ultimately, as you referenced, as a US company, MoneyGram understandably looked at the SEC's actions here in the United States and decided, hey, we're gonna pause this. And so we mutually agreed, hey, let's wind down the partnership for now. if and when there's clarity with the SEC, I expect we'll revisit that. And again, as I said, even since the SEC brought their lawsuit, we've signed up lots of competitors to MoneyGram and other corridors around the world.
So I've got to ask you this as well. Given that during 2017, when there was this just boom of ICOs, initial coin offerings, you came out and you were pretty down on them. You said a lot of them were scams. I've got to ask, just because right now we're living in this moment where there's a new craze, the NFT craze of non-fungible tokens. It's quite different from the ICO mania that we had in years past. But I've got to get your thoughts on it. You know, some people think it's ridiculous. Other people think it's the next coming of social networks and you know, managing economics online. Where do you stand on this NFT mania, and do you own any yourself?
Like, I'm a believer that NFTs are definitely here to stay. I think that there are so many use cases. Again, one of the things I've talked a lot about is being clear about who's the customer, what problem are you solving? And I do think with NFTs, you're solving a problem. And you know, that I'll talk about collectibles. You know, I don't know what things you may be interested in collect, but growing up, I had a baseball card collection, and the ability to trade baseball cards is very high friction. If you're able to issue an NFT associated with each individual baseball card, the tradability of that goes way up. Whether you're talking about artists, collectibles, music, there's a lot of use cases here that are very compelling. And it certainly, you've seen some hype about NFTs right out of the gates. But I think NFTs are definitely here to stay. And certainly we are doing things as we partner with the XRP Ledger community to make sure the XRP Ledger can support that. So I will point out that one of the problems that artists and creators have been sensitive to is that the fees, and you know, this is part of the inefficiency and the energy costs of some proof of work blockchains, make it hard to scale into long tail collectibles, because if the fees or the charged for NFTs are too high, that makes it difficult to scale that business.
There are some blockchains that are moving from proof of work to proof of stake, like Ethereum, and they're hoping that this is actually going to bring down the fees that you cited. I wonder what your long-term prospects are for Bitcoin, for Ethereum, for various other cryptocurrencies, given the sort of technological changes they're seeking to implement, what you're bullish on.
Well, look, I'm bullish on the whole industry. You know, I certainly continue to believe in the category overall. I think as you described, there is a need, I think, to be intellectually honest about how proof of work and the energy consumption, and by extension, the carbon footprint. There are some already Bitcoin miners coming out saying, hey, we're only going to be renewable. And so I have certainly been vocal, but just personal passion around the issue of climate change, and trying to be really honest about, hey, what does proof of work mean to these industries? What is the carbon emissions? And let's be intellectually honest and own that and figure out how to address it. As you pointed out, the Ethereum community and their migration from proof of work to proof of stake is kind of ahead of the game there. And I'm certainly bullish on the work they're doing.
Brad, thank you so much for all of your time. I want to just hit you with one last question before we part. Last year, you had mentioned that you might be moving Ripple outside of the U.S. at some point if the country didn't figure out its regulatory situation. Is that something you're still mulling, a possibility you are still thinking about?
Well, we certainly have, as you and I discussed, most of our customers are outside the United States, and we certainly are growing the company much faster outside the United States than here in the U.S. I'm hopeful that we'll get to closure here in the U.S. and, you know, either through legislative efforts or through court efforts, we'll have that clarity and certainty to allow us to continue to invest in blockchain and crypto industry here domestically.
Excellent. Brad, thank you so much for all of your time today.
Good to see you.